All right, let's go ahead and dive right into the 9.16b patch notes. I'm going to skip the intro, just go right into the changes. Brawler nerf, 300 health to 250 at 2 Brawlers and 600 to 500 at 3, and then 100 less health also at 6 Brawlers. I think this is very fair. A lot of Brawlers it's pretty much the main composition for most players right now, so it is good to take them down a notch. Completely fair. Probably won't change much since they're still pretty strong, but overall I like this change. It encourages people to explore other options. Champion nerfs, Draven, slight nerf, both health and damage. I don't think this is going to change that much since it's just level 1 Draven, who's super weak anyways. Overall, it's a fair nerf since Draven's probably one of the strongest champions in the game right now. Jinx, same thing, same nerf. Though I don't think this Jinx nerf is going to affect that much because once she pops off, the game's pretty much over already. So even if she has a slight nerf to when she pops off, it really shouldn't change that many outcomes of particular matches. But overall, still a good nerf since she's actually pretty hard to balance because she's so snowbally. But she's definitely probably second tier option after Draven in terms of carries. So I think this is completely warranted. Kayle nerfed, shield duration reduced at levels 2 and 3. I don't think this makes a difference at all. Nobles are strong because of the noble buff, not because of level 2 Kayle. In fact, level 1 Kayle is actually still the same, so in 90% of games, this change won't mean anything because, first off, getting invulnerability for even 1 second saves someone from huge burst damage already because she targets the low health people, so she might actually just save them with a 1 second ult, so I don't think this makes a difference at all. Nobles are busted because it's so hard to get, and they're so weak before they hit Kayle, but once they hit level 1 Kayle, it's strong enough just to live through almost anything. So I think this wasn't the right way to go about nerfs. If anything, this only makes it weaker for non-noble teams who just happen to get Kayle and want to run her as like an 8th or 9th person. Lucian ability damage nerf. I actually didn't know Lucian did this much damage. That's actually insane. But they nerfed it by 33% at level 1, which is completely huge. Level 2, just a very slight nerf, so I think that's fair because Lucian wasn't by any means busted, especially since gunslingers aren't that popular apart from only running 2 of them with Jinx. But Lucian's also played in Nobles a lot, so the later level nerfs are a slight nerf to Nobles, but he isn't their main damage dealer anyways. It's normally Blade Masters who are the main carries of Nobles. But the level 1 nerf definitely warranted. He's the strongest level 2 unit at the beginning of the game, so I think this is completely fair. Vi, mana change to 150, but it's still the same mana to start the game. She'll still only need 75 mana to get her first ultimate off, but then her second one takes 25 more mana. I think this is fair. She gets her second ultimate off in most games since she just stays alive really long. 1, because she's a brawler, and 2, because she runs away from the fight to maybe someone weaker, maybe someone who blitzcrank hooked. So she'll probably still get her second ultimate off, but it is a good change because she was very popular due to Hextech combinations with Jinx, and because brawlers are just probably the strongest class right now. But maybe with the brawler nerf, with the Jinx nerf, and now with this mana nerf, maybe we'll see less of her overall. But I still think she's probably really strong because her first ult is pretty devastating because it hits so many people. Now we go to the buffs. Aatrox buffed at level 1, nerfed at level 3. So the level 3 one doesn't matter. No one cared about that 50 damage, but the level 1 buff definitely is something to consider because his level 1 is probably one of the weakest out of most champions because he gets such a big power spike from level 1 to level 2. It's actually incredible. So I think this 50 damage really does help him. However, I think Aatrox was already strong in this meta. He's played in a lot of team comps such as anyone who uses Blade Masters or Demons, and he's most of the time the main carry, and they get him to level 2 anyways. So I don't know why they need to buff him, especially when they're nerfing like brawler comps, because I think he's already strong. Anivia buffed from 650 health to 700. Anivia is more of a, not really at fault herself, it's more of the meta that's at fault for her being weak, because she's really good with and against rangers because of the way her ult works, and she's a glacial. So I don't think she needed a buff. It's just not the right meta for her. So once it is her meta, she might be too strong and they might need to dial her back. Though 50 health isn't that game breaking, but it is still a buff that I don't think was really necessary. I think they should have just left her alone. Gnar buff, transform damage actually went up a lot. 20 damage at level 1 and 40 at level 2. Since Gnar's wild, he gets a lot of attacks off, and this is actually a huge buff, because 20 damage every single auto, that adds up really quickly. 40 damage, even faster. So this is actually a huge buff to Gnar. Though games are generally over after he ults anyways, maybe it's not as game-breaking as I think it is, but I don't think this was that warranted, because Gnar's already pretty good once you get him to level 2 anyways. His CC mechanic is just insane, especially against Draven and Jinx, where you could just take him out of the backline into the middle of the game. For example, you run Gnar with Kennen with 3 Yordles, and Gnar can knock Draven or Jinx into your Kennen ult, which pretty much just wins you that fight. So I don't think Gnar, while he is not as popular as the other epic units, I don't think this buff was that necessary, since he does have his uses already. Misfortune buff. So they've been buffing her every single patch, which is fair because she's by far the weakest legendary. I just hope they don't over buff her by accident one patch. This is very small buff, so I think it's fine. But if they keep buffing her, eventually she might be broken once like gunslingers get a buff. Because we're seeing her a lot now because Jinx is played. So maybe if they add some other indirect buff to Gunslinger, she might be outright broken based on all the buffs that she's received. Morgana, increased armor, reduced ability damage. This is a good change because she does die way too quickly on the front line if she has no items, but if she has items, she's perfectly fine out there. So I think this buff does help her, since I think you'd rather have items on other champions when you do run Morgana. For example, when you run Morgana, you're likely to run Aatrox or likely to run Kennen, and those two use items better than Morgana. So I think this is a good buff for her, because as long as she gets a second part of her ultimate off, which 30 armor does help over 20, she'll be much, much stronger. Because the way damage reduction is calculated in League of Legends and in TFT is that the first 10 armor that you get is much more effective than maybe if she went from 100 to 110 armor. So every armor, when she had so little to begin with, really makes a huge difference. Shen buffed at level 1. I don't think this makes that much of a difference because all the other Blade Masters are so good. He has to compete against Gangplank, he has to compete against Aatrox, Yasuo, Draven, that he's not going to see any play in Blade Masters. So the only buff this is to is for ninjas. However, this is only a level 1 buff. And ninjas aren't really that strong because assassins are weak, because you normally build ninjas with assassins because both Akali and Zed are assassins. So the only thing this changes is that you can play Shen maybe in the first PvP round if you have no one else better to put in, and that's a slight buff to him there. So I guess he'll see more action in that sense, but I don't really think this changes anything for him. Luden's nerf 200 to 180 damage. Luden's is such a weird item because it's so good on champions that use it well, but so weak on everyone else. Good champions are people such as Lucian, Ahri, Yasuo. You'll notice that Ahri and Lucian are both heavily early game focused champions, while Yasuo is the only late game one. So what people end up doing is they build Ludens on Ahri or Lucian to win the early game, and then once they sell those champions, they put all those items on someone such as Aurelion Sol, who needs both the mana and ability power. And Aurelion Sol does not make great use of the Luden's effect of the 180 AoE damage. So while Luden's is really strong early, it is a very situational item. So I don't think that it should have been touched, just because only very few champions make a great use out of it. Bug fixes, further adjustments to in-game matchmaking to prevent seeing the same opponents as often. I wish they just released how this actually works, just so we we're more familiar and can play around it. Because does this mean you don't face the same person the entire stage, or you just don't face him next round or for 2 rounds? We don't really know how that works, but I'm sure someone will figure it out just through trial and error. The Hextech trait now disables Ionic Spark for the appropriate 8 seconds instead of the whole round. Yeah, that's completely necessary because Ionic Spark, I don't know if you guys knew, but if you get the Hextech effect where it disables Ionic Spark, it actually disables it for the entire match instead of just for 8 seconds. So it becomes pretty useless. So that's a great fix. That's it for the patch notes. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and follow me on my socials below.